Now, let's jump into this. It's been a while. It feels like forever, actually, since this game happened.
Yeah.
Last Wednesday, it hasn't even been a week. Let's recap this game a little bit and get off, like, I guess, the rewatch again, the highlights, whatever we decided to do to dive deep into this further. Arizona State in this game, this is the thing that blew my mind. So they ran 97 plays. Georgia Tech in the 8 overtime game versus Georgia ran 84. Think about that. Arizona State in 2 overtimes ran 97. Georgia Tech in 8 overtimes ran 84. That blew my mind because I was curious when I thought about that. So I looked up the Georgia Tech Georgia game. And this defense, I tweeted it out. I don't know what play it was in the game, but I saw a point where this defense, you could tell they were getting tired. I don't even think Arizona State scored on the drive I tweeted out, but you kind of saw the momentum growing for Arizona State. And to me, it was around the 60 to 65 play mark, and the average in the game 70. So right around the average of a game being played in college football, they were getting tired. So that made sense to me. Gerald, did that pop out to you as well?
Yeah, that and like you couple that with like the time of possession difference that we called out post game. Like there was almost a 10-minute difference in the third quarter, which I think you saw bear itself out in the results in the fourth quarter, where the defense looked uncharacteristically tired, uncharacteristically undisciplined. Manny Muhammad quit on that Cam Scatabo pass play. Guys just making silly mental mistakes that they don't normally make in those spots. So you see that massive time of possession differential there in the third quarter, which again, you run more plays. And going into the game, it's something that I clocked. Arizona State was like going into that like a top 10 team in seconds per play, where they would take almost all of the play clock to run a play and kind of keep the defenses on the field. They were a top 15 team in time of possession differential. So like that's the game plan. And it's smart from Dillingham because their defense, like frankly, as we saw the game ended, their defense can't really keep up with the Texas offense. So that to me, again, we mentioned it post game briefly, but I think it's great to bring it back into the conversation. Like that was the big difference in the first half versus the second half. And some of that, I say some of that, a lot of that's on the offense's inability to keep to keep themselves on the field, right? Because the Texas defense got 6 straight stops and the offense got 3 points out of it. Like that's just, you can't do that.
Yeah, this team doesn't really have the capability, or they do have the capability, but they don't do it on a consistent basis of playing complementary football. Yep. You see streakiness from the offense and defense, mostly the offense. I think the defense has done pretty damn well. And people look at the total yards and everything like that. Yeah, they give up 510 total yards, but on 97 plays, that's 5.3 yards per play. That's not bad at all. And
much worse.
Yeah, exactly. And if you get rid of the Scatabo pass and the punt that they faked and completed, that counts as well. You're at 4.6 yards per play. That's elite stuff. Yeah. And I do get rid of those because, guys, let's be honest here. How many games are you counting on your punter to complete a pass and your running back to complete a pass? You shouldn't be counting on that. That's something that's not replicable. So that's why I say when you get rid of those.
Yeah, I think that's the solid decision to make when you think about it. And there's just something to be said about like the offense getting in its own way in a lot of spots where, this offensive line is banged up. It is what it is, right? Like Cam Williams still may not be able to go this weekend. Like we'll find that out as the week ticks along, right? Jake Majors banged up still. Like I'm pretty sure it was a concussion. They didn't really ever release what it was, but like the way that dude hit the ground, I'm pretty sure. But like it's an offensive line that's not up to snuff. And this Ohio State team, we'll talk about that in a couple of minutes, right? Like they're going to be able to key on that. But you saw it come out against Arizona State. Texas just could not get the ball running on the ground, ball going on the ground, and that handicaps the entire offense. The offense goes the way of the running game, and we saw what happened against Arizona State.
100%, and that we definitely need to run the ball better in this next game. If we don't, this will not be a fun game to watch. I'll put it that way.
For sure.
Texas or Arizona State as well, 10 of 24 on third down. First off, when I read the number of 24 third down plays, my mouth dropped because I've never seen a
huge number.
By the way, I don't know what the college record is. I looked it up. That would tie the NFL record in a game of third down conversions attempted.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's insane.
Yeah, it's insane.
It passes the eye test, though. When you look at how Arizona State was able to stay on the field, that checks out.
Yeah, 10 of 24 is good. Like, that's a good percentage. If you can do that, your coach would definitely replicate it. And then this even is crazier because they went for it 6 times on fourth down. They had 30 attempts on third and fourth down. They converted 13. So that's not a good percentage for Texas. You'd like that number to be about between 8 to 10. at 10 at the highest. 13 is almost 50% completion on third and fourth down. That is not good. That is something that's going to have to get better. I will say that's kind of a one-off, though, because Texas has been a really good third down and fourth down
Very good.
conversion team on defense. They've been able to stop that. But props to Arizona State. They drew up some stuff. I think Levitt's ability to escape the pocket, that guy was, in my opinion, in my lifetime of watching Texas football, I think he was the second most elusive quarterback Texas has faced.
Yeah.
I think Taysom Hill's number one for me and always will be. Number two is Sam Levitt now. That guy was outrunning our linebackers and edge players to the edge. I was shocked at that. And he's a good athlete. Now, was he able to complete very many passes off that? No, he's 22 of 46. So not a very good day with that, but very impressive.
And I want to go back. I was trying to pull up the stat when you were talking about third downs. Of the 10 third downs that Arizona State converted, 6 of them were 4 yards and shorter. Their average distance to go was 4.4 yards. All right. So like they not only like they did well on first and second down to set them up to have these really favorable 11 of their 24 attempts were 4 yards or shorter. Right. So I can't say like the vast majority of it, but almost half of their attempts were from 4 yards or shorter. You're going to convert a ton of those because especially with a back like Scatabo, that guy just has to fall forward and he's going to get 4 yards. It is what it is. So like that to me, huge difference in the game. It's like Texas average distance to go was 7.4 yards, right? Like that's not a great split when you look at it. And that's part of the reason why Arizona State completed 10 and Texas converted 5.
Yeah, 100%. And it's weird because they really, other than a couple plays that off the top of my head, they didn't have any super explosive plays. They kind of just, consistently got 2 to 3 to 4 yards and were able to keep like on time. Whereas we were kind of boom or bust, honestly. Like if we didn't have like a 20-yard play, we didn't have anything. The only big plays they had were the Scatabo pass, the punt pass, the Scatabo run. And then there was a Troy O'Meary big catch, but then that got taken back for 15 yards from the penalty. So I don't even consider that a big play because I don't think they gained anything off of that with the penalty.
Yeah. So looking at the big plays, Texas had 9 plays longer than 15 yards. Arizona State had 12 longer than 15 yards. I guess 7 runs longer than 10 yards, 5 passes longer than 15 yards. So like they had some, but Texas was kind of in the same boat, right? The big stat for me is that Arizona State had those 7 big running plays. Texas had 0 rushes longer than 10 yards. I don't know if they had a rush longer than 7 yards. I think the long for the game was like 7. I got to pull that up. Yeah, 7. Trey Wisner had that 7-yard rush. That was the long of the day. Like that's just not going to get it done.
No, I mean, that's exactly like the Georgia game. I think the longest rush in one of the Georgia games was like 6 or 7 yards. It's the exact same thing. And that's where everything is going to come back down into this. And when we get into that Ohio State preview, we'll talk about it. If Texas doesn't run the ball, you can beat Texas. If they run the ball, they're very hard to beat, period. Because then you can hit play action off that. Quinn Ewers is good at with turning his back and then anticipating throws and everything like that. But if you have to just throw all the time, they're in trouble. But I will say this, and I would like to see this more. When they run 5 out wide receivers, Quinn Ewers is like one of the 5 best quarterbacks in the country with passer rating. So I don't understand why they don't do that more. I think it like kind of helps him out, see the field a little bit more, allows him more options as well. So to me, Steve Sarkisian, and this is one of the other points I want to get off in this Arizona State game, he has to do a much better job of sequencing his plays and just play calling in general. They just don't make sense sometimes. Like that interception that Quinn threw, bad pass, late, and it's lofted over the middle. You can't do that.
Yeah.
But it didn't make sense because I believe that was on 2nd and 6 where we just knocked off a 4-yard run, and there was a play before that to convert to that first down. That was a run as well for 4 or 5 yards. That was successful compared to the other runs in the game. So in my opinion, you should have kept going back to that, especially with what the score was and the time of game and everything like that. I just didn't understand some of the play calls by Steve Sarkisian.
Yeah, I would like to see and again, this is something I've said before. I'll say it again. It's a hill I'll die on. Sometimes I think Sark is too smart for his own good, where he's like, okay, we had 2 really successful runs. Let's take a shot play now. And like, I'm not going to say don't take shot plays because that's just what football is, right? You find the right time and take a shot play, see what happens. But this game specifically, the offense needed consistency. They didn't need chunk plays. They didn't need to eat up yards in big pieces. They needed 4 yards a carry is what they needed. They needed to be able to crank out 4 yards and let the defense catch its freaking breath. It's like that to me is one of those spots where they have to be able to play complementary football, and it starts at the top, right? If the defensive coordinator can't tell the head coach, like, hey, we need to slow down when your head coach is your play caller, right? And that's one of the things that you struggle with having the head coach as the play caller is that ultimately Pete Kwiatkowski, that's his boss, right? Like he can't say, Sark, slow the hell down, pump the brakes. I need you to make this one go long, right? That's something that has to fall on Sark to call the right plays and to really think about how do we complement what was outside of that. Like, again, that first half was some of the best defense we've seen all year, right? Like, how do we complement that with the offense? How do we slow this game down? And again, we've got a big lead. Take the air out of the ball, run the ball, let the defense catch its breath, and continue to keep Cam Scatterbo from going off.
Yeah, exactly. This isn't a type of game where you, in my opinion, needed a lot of points to win. If they played this game correctly, they could have won that game 24-8. Like that game could have ended at 24-8. Everyone would have been home healthy, fine. We would have been fine with that. And now this isn't that game where when we play Ohio State, you're going to have probably 5 to 7 20+ yard completions in this game. Now, can we stop throwing the ball deep over the middle? That does not work. The sideline shots work consistently, especially the last month of the season. Down the middle does not work. Intermediate down the middle does. I've seen that work, and you're going to have to attack that again when we get into Ohio State. They play a lot of cover 2. Where do you attack cover 2? Down the middle. So Gunnar Helm, you're going to have to win in that. But please, so like the wide receivers on the outs, throw it to them on the outside. Do not throw them post. Don't throw anything like that. I'm trying to think the last time we hit a post play that was deep. I don't even know.
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. I'd have to look.
It's been a very long time is the point, because I can think of 5 to 6 times where Matthew Golden's going down the sideline and it's caught. I can think of a couple other times where Ryan Wingo's going down the sideline and it's caught, where DeAndre Moore's going down the sideline and it's caught. Another thing that has disappeared, and listen, this is another issue I have with Sark too. So it didn't work versus Georgia. That doesn't mean you have to scrap it versus everyone else. We don't throw wide receiver screens anymore. Ever since we played Georgia in the SEC championship game, we've just said, no, we're not throwing wide receiver screens anymore, which, listen, they didn't work versus Georgia, but I wouldn't mind trying them versus Clemson and Arizona State.
I think you're going to need to do something like that in this game. We'll talk again where I'm like creeping ahead to Ohio State conversation, but like, yes, you're going to need to do something to soften the defense up. Arizona State would have been a good spot to do it. Now, I think going into the game, you probably don't scheme that up enough because you don't necessarily think that you're going to need them against Arizona State. But like, how do you have them in your back pocket when you do need them, right? What does that look like for Sark? What is it looking for the offense?
Well, that's what's frustrating is you saw when we needed it, the play calling got better. I mean, the late fourth quarter play calling was much better. The overtime play calling was much better. The Matthew Golden play was a great play both times. The Gunnar Helm tight end leak was a fantastic play that you never see. He's called it twice in 2 years. He called it versus Iowa State and he called it versus Arizona State. Maybe work that in every other game or something like that. It works. I don't know. I just don't understand it.
As a big proponent of therapy, Steve Sarkisian and I both, right? I need you to talk to your therapist about why you got to make it harder on yourself, man. Like, why do you have to put yourself in those situations to be excellent?
100%. We'll touch on the offense a little bit for Texas, and then we'll move on to Ohio. We'll actually move on to Steve Sarkisian getting calls from the NFL. We'll talk about that. But first, this Texas running the ball, 22 carries for 49 yards from the running backs in this game, 2.2 yards per carry. That does not get it done. We were lucky to win that football game because of that. It has to be better, period. And I don't know whether we have to put in more inside zone to keep teams honest I think teams cheat on outside zone and teams know, hey, guess what? When you play Texas, it's going to be 80-90% outside zone. And I think at some point, Sark, especially this game, you're going to have to run 5 to 7 to 5 to 10 plays of inside zone to mix it up.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And if you go and look at like the Texas game logs of just like total rushing, the tightest games they have are the ones with the lowest rushing totals, right? You look at Louisiana Monroe, 51-3, they had 239 yards, 198 yards against Mississippi State, right? OU, 177 yards. Lose to Georgia, 29 yards, 104 yards against Vandy, right? Tight game. 210 against Florida, blow them off the field. 139 against Arkansas, tighter game than it should have been, right? That to me is the bellwether for if the Texas offense is going to be able to play. Is can they run the ball? Can they move the ball on the ground? Because if they're not, like there's a nuanced conversation we need to have about Quinn Ewers and his place in Texas history all time. But like as it stands right now, if the offense is not able to run the ball, Quinn Ewers cannot operate the offense. And most quarterbacks can't, right? That's not just a knock on him. That's any quarterback. If you go one-dimensional, if you can't balance, and Steve Sarkisian talks about balance on an offense is being able to run the kind of play you need to when you need to, right? And Texas in this game was not able to do that. And that, to me, an offense off balance always favors the defense. So that's like the thing. If they can run the ball against Ohio State, big if, it'll be a different game. But part of the reason why Texas gave up this big comeback was because they couldn't run the ball when they needed to. Arizona State bled the clock, tired out the defense, and that's a complementary football issue on the offense.
Yeah, 100%. And this next thing has been an issue all year. Cam Williams has actually been the main guy I've had the issue with, but I hope he plays in this game because there is a downgrade. That is something I noticed. On outside zone, Trevor Guzman doesn't get the movement Cam Williams does. Makes sense. He's not as big, hasn't played as long. Pass protection-wise, I actually think they're probably about the same, honestly, but it's the outside zone I noticed the biggest thing is with Cam Williams, and I think he will play. I watched some snaps of him today. For a guy with a sprained knee, he's moving around pretty well, so I expect him to play. But 10 penalties for 67 yards, and there are penalties that could be stopped. I don't mind once in a while if a guy jumps off sides, trying to jump the snap count to go get the quarterback. I don't mind that once in a while, once, maybe twice a game. I don't mind aggressive plays like Andrew Makupa coming downhill and blowing people up. If you get a penalty on that, fine. I cannot stand false starts constantly, especially when you're already in bad situations. 4th and 8 in overtime. You know what? Let's just make this harder on Quinn and jump off or get a false start. 4th and 13. He bails us out. There are multiple plays like that, and I don't understand. I don't know what they can do to fix it at this point, but it's got to fix going into next season for sure.
I mean, 3 of the 4 false start penalties were on 1st and 2nd downs. That puts you behind the chains. It's a 1st and 15, 1st and 15, and a 2nd and 8 is what you're looking at based on those false starts. It's not a drive killer like it used to be for Texas, but it is an absolutely drive like put the brakes on. It's going to slow you down quite a bit. And again, you mentioned that the false start on 4th and 8, right? Texas converted on the 4th and 13, but that's 4th and game. You cannot. And Kelvin Banks is going to be a top selection in the NFL draft. It is what it is, right? So like you cannot have that. You cannot have that happen. These are self-inflicted wounds. It just enabled the defense. When you look at the defensive penalties, because I don't want to talk about it, like the big ones came kind of toward the latter half of the game when they were tired and struggling. You have the PI, you have 2 PIs and a holding that come late in the game on that. That running into the kicker one early in the game was just so stinking weird. Like, I just don't think he expected to be that free, and so he didn't know how to control. It's almost like when a wide receiver is too open, but back to the original point, like false starts on 1st down, coming out of a timeout, coming out of a TV timeout, coming off of the sideline, if you false start, like I had an offensive line coach that would sit you. Like if you false started coming out of a timeout, you're riding pine for the next series. It just is what it is. Like it is inexcusable in my book.
Yeah, and honestly, they could probably do that with everyone other than Kelvin Banks if they wanted to, because we have pretty good offensive line depth. But you don't want to do that. Honestly, they probably should have done that earlier in the year because it's been an issue the whole damn year, and it's really
100%.
frustrating to watch. And this game's going to come down to them. It really is. I think that's one of the matchups when we go into the Ohio State preview. This is where I think Texas matches up very well. Like you have legit, really high-level NFL talent along this offensive line. They just need to play up to that capability. If they can do that for a game, they can beat Ohio State. But we'll see if that happens. Also, on that punt block, I wanted to hit on that because everyone was talking about, Arizona State got screwed with targeting, and I've been sick of hearing that. By the way, that's not a penalty. He was outside of the tackle box. Once you run outside of the tackle box as a punter, you can blow up the punter. So that shouldn't have been a penalty. It was a BS call. So there you go. And guess what? They scored 3 points on that.
I mean, officiating has been bad this year and getting worse. I don't know what to tell you.
It was bad. That game especially was freaking terrible.
It was almost like a Big 12 game
ever. Yeah. And it was a Big Ten crew, so it wasn't. And that's the thing, too. I don't know who the officials for this game are It's going to be interesting. But what I have noticed is they're not going to call holding. I watched the Ohio State-Oregon game. Ohio State was getting held. Oregon got held a couple times. Texas got held a lot versus Arizona State. They're not going to call holding in the college football playoff. I haven't yet to see very many holding calls.
And here's the thing. If you're going to call it that way, call it both ways. I don't care. Like, as long as one team isn't getting favorable calls over the other, just call it the same either way. If you're going to call it tight, call it tight. If you're going to call it loose, call it loose. I don't care. Just call it the same for both teams. And again, I'm somebody that says, like, you should never put the game in the hands of the referees, but there are times when that's impossible, right? But like, I don't. If you're going to let both teams hold, great. Call it down the middle. If you're going to call it a tight game, call it down the middle. I don't care if it's tight or loose. It's more frustrating when you call it maybe a little more loose, but it is what it is, right? Just call it down the middle.
I've always been a big proponent of this, and people probably wouldn't like it, but if it doesn't affect the play, I don't call it. That's how I look at it. If it's on the freaking backside of a play, I really don't care what happens, or I don't. If it's affecting the play, I care. Call it. Just like that pass interference that was not catchable in the end zone, they threw on Jahdae Barron. That ball was not going to be caught. Whoever the wide receiver was, and they called him. I was like, why?
The wide receiver is 8 foot tall. You didn't know that, right? That guy's 8 feet tall.
Yeah. And he's got the what is that? Space Jam Michael Jordan the ability.
Yeah. Stretch Armstrong.
Oh yeah. Troy V says ACC crew. Honestly, I don't know what conference has the best officials. I think SEC officials from what I've seen this year are pretty good compared to the Big 12 at least. That was my first experience of the Big 10. Not very good on that. ACC, the only thing that comes to mind is when Miami and Duke played that one game and there was like 20 laterals back and forth and Duke ended up winning that game. There was like 9 different times where the ball was actually thrown forward. So that's like a bad memory I have from the ACC crew. So I don't even know, honestly.
We'll find out on Saturday, I guess.
Yeah. Again, guys, please hit that like button. Please subscribe down below. We're here every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern time, no matter what. So please check us out here at Texas at the Voice